of the Sunday school on credit cards and debt this morning. Very important. And so we're going to look at Proverbs 22. We were talking about budgeting last week. And my wife and I got on a budget early in our marriage. And we've been on a budget all these years. At one time, it literally scrutinized down to the penny, but it still scrutinizes pretty good. And what Mr. Budget says is what goes in our house. Amen. If Mr. Budget says you can't do it, then you can't do it. That's the reason why people don't want to do a budget, because the budget demands certain things, tells you can't do certain things. And sometimes we don't want the reality. We don't have to face the reality of where we're really at. But if you're not willing to face reality, it's never going to get better. And so that's my 2 cents worth on that one. But we're going to go forward. Debt, credit cards, and debt. The age of mass consumption actually began in the early 1920s. They were referred to as the Roaring Twenties. And it was... The Roaring Twenties ended with the great stock market crash that led to the Great Depression. And it was during this time in America that installment credit really took root. You could buy now and pay later. And instead of saving until something could be afforded, you could now have it. People began to go into debt to acquire consumer durables. This required that they allocate larger and larger portions of their income to pay their debts. One of the tipping points that contributed to the Great Depression was banks that were loaning money in almost an irresponsible manner, and it all came to a tipping point. It came crashing down. Now today it's very common to get loads of credit card offers in the mail every month. Loan offers, especially around Christmas time, and they come in loads. It was reported in April that credit card debt as a nation went over $1 trillion. Now, this is a staggering number, staggering. This is personal credit card debt, over $1 trillion as a people in a nation. But debt has become a way of life for Americans. I'm going to read you a little article. Man, I have to do this without my glasses. It's tormenting. All right. So the average American's credit card debt may shock you. Okay. If they're 1.25, I'll take them. If they're higher than 1.25, it's too strong. What are they? Oh, perfect. It's because we're about the same age, huh? All right. Thank you. All right, I'm going to do this. This is not a fashion show, so if they don't look right on me, don't worry about it. All right, here we go. Do I look like George Ponce now? He does this, so I'm going to do this for you now. Okay. The average American has $3,600 in credit card debt. Now, don't get all excited and say, that's it, because we're going to go somewhere here. But that number does not tell the whole story. Because when they average this all out, they average it on people that even have credit card debt, but it's paid every month. So it says here, some Americans have no credit card debt at all. Some have credit card debt but don't carry a balance. Using data from the U.S. Census Bureau and Federal Reserve found that the average credit card debt for households, you ready for this? That carry a balance is a shocking $16,048. A figure that has risen by 10% over the past 3 years at the average variable credit card interest rate of 16.1%. This translates to nearly $2,600 in credit card interest alone per year. That's on that 16,000. Many credit cards have interest rates much higher than the average, even scarier. Consider that based on average interest rates and a minimum payment of 1.5% of the balance, It would take nearly 14 years for the typical indebted household to pay off its existing credit card debt at a staggering cost. Okay, you owe $16,000. When you're done, you're going to pay $40,200. But keep in mind that this assumes no additional credit card debt is added to the tab along the way. Okay, this is overwhelming. And here is the curse of a generation: the ability to buy without having money. One man said, we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. Now, the truth is that buying on credit has become a way of life. Now, there are some things that perhaps this is the only way you can afford, like having a reliable car. Well, a lot of people don't have the money to put down, dish out of pocket, so we finance a car. The same when it comes to a home. But the problem is, in the drive of a materialistic culture, it hijacks our sensibilities and needs versus wants. And so, okay, you need a car. Fine, it's a need. But you really want this car that you can't afford. That's going to strap you for 5 years of payments that are way beyond your means, or that make you cut it. And it sounds all great at first because, you know, the car dealers are masters at giving you the first 2 months with no payments or whatever. But it's a mess. Now, my wife and I, we've always bought the car or home we could afford. Now, I'm just going to give you mine. Just because I'm giving you these numbers doesn't mean I'm imposing these on you. I'm just telling you from us, okay? We've never been able to afford a car that was $20,000. So we've never bought a car that cost $20,000. I think the highest we've ever paid for a car was $18,000. The highest we've ever financed for was $15,000. Because we always bought the car we could afford, not the car we would have liked to own. We have always determined what we can afford, not always by what we're making at the moment, because how many know that's subject to change? And we don't want to be strapped down with these large payments. We've never had a car payment that was $300 or more. Now, we both have great credit. We could easily qualify for much more than we've ever bought. I could have easily qualified, but we couldn't afford it. We like to get a payment that allows us to pay it off early and have a period of time with no car payment. The longer, the better. We've never had 2 car payments. Why? Because we cannot afford 2 car payments. It's that simple. It's not hard math. I flunked math. I got D's all through algebra in high school. But this makes sense, right? And so this concept's been lost in our generation. And you can apply the same to buying a home and many other things. But I'm talking about the 2 main things that seem to be the way that we almost, not everybody, but a lot of people have to carry some sort of a debt that is realistic. So let's get to the subject of credit cards. I'm going to go quickly as I want to leave plenty of room for you to talk. This is a major problem in our generation. And again, it's surpassing 1 trillion. Okay? So this is massive. Now, let's read our text real quick. Establish our biblical basis. Proverbs 22:7. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. So here is the reality concerning debt. You're a slave to the lender. Now, this can become very oppressive if you allow your debt to get out of control or be motivated by materialistic pursuits. And there are people here that you are under the oppression of your lender. You are living this scripture. You are a slave to the lender. Credit cards can get out of control very quickly due to, number 1, impulsive spending, and number 2, compound interest, okay? Now, credit cards are somewhat of a necessary tool in today's society. I have owned the same credit card since I was 18 years old. I have a 6.75% interest. I think it's something like prime plus 275. And I started with a $2,500 credit line with that card. They have, over the years, entrusted me with much, much more. Today, my statement reads zero balance. We have used that credit card many times for many different reasons and ways over the years. But we've always held in check impulsive spending. And we've always understood this topic of compound interest. Credit cards are somewhat necessary. If you're going to rent a car, I can tell you, you can use a debit card, but they're going to freeze a certain amount of money, and if anything goes wrong in that transaction, it's coming out of your bank account, so it's a lot better. And the way that the preference they give you with a credit card is better. The same with hotels. I get calls every year at conference. People go to check into their hotels. They don't own a credit card, but they want incidentals. They have to secure them on their debit card, and they freeze that money. And everyone's belly aching with me. I'm like, don't talk to me about it. I'm not the hotel owner. So there are some good uses and tools for credit cards, but they're very dangerous if they're in the wrong hands, if they're in irresponsible hands. Okay. And the problem is that credit cards have become a way of getting things without having the money. Securing lifestyles and gadgets and stuff. Some people foolishly pay their living expenses with their cards and buy groceries. And when I say that, I realize that some of you may do that and pay it off the same month because there's a point reward system you get. But I'm talking to those that do it just because it's the way you function. It becomes a revolving debt in your life. Before you know it, you're in a hole that you can't get out of and way over your head, oppressed and a slave to the lender. You'd be surprised how many people that's their testimony. And the purpose of this class is to help you, to hopefully launch something that will help you. Now, God put a provision in place among his people. It's in Exodus 22, 25 through 27. He says, if you lend money to any of my people who are poor among you, you shall not be like a moneylender to him, but you will not charge him interest. If you ever take your neighbor's garment as a pledge, you will return it to him before the sun goes down. So here's a great concept. God says, look, you're not going to oppress my people by people on people, God's people on God's people, charging interest. It's called usury in the Bible. You'll find that word. That'd be great if credit card people had the same thing in mind, but this is their money-making tool, and that is the interest that they charge on credit cards. The whole purpose of offering you a credit card is the interest they get in return. They're not looking out for your best interest. I know they advertise it in a way it makes it sound like they're doing you a humongous favor in life, giving you this credit card or this line of credit. But it's all about the return that they get. And there's this web that gets real sticky when we're talking about this. So the realities involved in credit cards. One of the greatest things you need to understand and respect about credit cards is the interest accrued on them and how it works. Okay? First of all, do you even know what your interest rate is on your card? That's pretty important. Usually when they're offering you an offer in the mail, you turn over that application, and on the very back there's this little graph, and it has all these little fine writings, and it tells you what the interest rate is. And beware, because they'll suck you in with 0% interest for 6 months, and you'll go crazy, and then it'll all come crashing down on the 6th month and 1 day. And it'll be a sobering moment for you when the first bill comes in. So what's the interest rate? Most credit cards are 10% and over. I think the average is around 16%. Many are between 14 and 21%, which is a very high rate of interest, by the way. Okay. Now, the way that credit card interest works, and I had to, my head was spinning trying to figure out. I called Jonathan to help me out on it to make sure I don't make your head spin. I just want you to simple understanding. And it's changed over time. I verified through Jonathan because I know there's still some, but I think only a few that still charge day to day, which is loan shark criminal in my mind. That's the reason why I called them. I said, is this really true? Because to me, in my mind, says, that's not right, man. Let's go chop their hands off. They would charge you daily interest, daily compound interest. But regardless, it's a monthly charge in most cases. You need to find out. You need to know how they're charging you your interest. You need to know what the dates are, that after 21 days, 25 days, whatever they give you as a grace period, when it kicks in. You need to know that, okay? And so the interest rates, you can get better interest rates if you have good credit. And so this is a whole nother topic that I'm not going to go into, but good credit is very important in today's society because it really does help you when you're buying cars and houses and all sorts of things to get good rates. The good rates go to people with good credit. The bad rates to the people with bad credit. Okay? So most credit cards will give you more or less a month or a 25-day period, somewhere in there, to pay off what you punched up. So you go out there and you punch this up, and if you pay it all off in that time frame, you don't get charged any interest. Okay? The moment that you surpass that grace period, immediately the interest is now upon that. So now you owe whatever the amount you charged plus the interest added. So now it has grown, okay? Now that in itself isn't always too much, but where it starts to get out of control is, it's not like you can buy a car and they'll say your interest rate is this much, and they'll calculate this, and they'll say your loan amount's $10,000. We're adding, let's just say another $1,000 is the interest over the period of the loan. You pay it all off. It's good. No, with credit cards, they recharge the same money that you've already charged again and again and again until you pay it off. So if you have a $5,000 on your card, and let's say you paid $300 of it off in a month, they've already charged you on the $5,000 interest. Now they're going to charge you on the $4,700 plus the new stuff you punched up. It starts getting charged. It's a racket, okay? And so I'm going to get to the particulars of this in a minute. And so once the date's passed, they start charging. And something to note, because they allow you cash advances on cards, and you need to know that majority of cash advances are at a different level of APR. That's your percentage rate. So you may have a card at 12%, but the cash advance is at 19 or 21%. So you go and you pull out actual cash on your card of $1,000. Now that amount is now going to be taxed at an interest rate of 19 or 21. But here's the thing, okay? So you go punch that up, you think, oh man, it's just a quick one. I'm going to have the money in 2 weeks and I'll pay it off. Well, here's the problem. If you have a balance on the card, let's say you have a $3,000 balance. That $1,000, you don't just go to the credit card company and say, okay, I'm giving this $1,000, but this $1,000's for that cash advance. No, sir. That cash advance comes in the order in which it was punched. So as soon as you pay off the other $3,000 in front of it, you'll start paying off that $1,000. Well, here's the problem. So now you're getting charged an interest rate on the $3,000 and another interest rate on top of it for the $1,000. So you see how you can get in trouble really, really fast with your credit cards and the way you use them. Now the problem with interest on credit, so let's really get to this, and I do want to leave plenty of time for people to speak, so let me get moving here. The problem with interest in the credit card is what they call compounding interest. It's not just applied the one time on that charge. It's charged again and again, and it compounds. Now, I'm going to show it. I'm going to take Jonathan's recommendation. I'm going to show you compound interest in the ways if it was an investment, just to give you an idea how it works. And you can take this and realize this is what they're doing to you with a credit card. So put up this chart and the compound interest. So here's the power of compound interest. So we're taking an investment of $10,000. So you've put $10,000 in. They're saying they're giving you a 5% return. So after year one, they've tacked on $500, which is the interest you've earned. Now you're at $10,500. So now the 5% is no longer on the $10,000. It's now on the $10,500, which is good if you're investing. So now they're doing 5% of $10,500, which is $525. So now after year two, you have $11,025. So now they put the 5% on the $11,025, and now the interest you've gained is $551 more and 25 cents. Now you have $11,576 and 25 cents after year three. So they do this again on year four. You've now earned $578 in year 4 with 81 cents. You now have $12,255 and 6 cents. And then year 5, same thing. Total interest in 5 years that you've earned is $2,782 and 59. That's great. In an investment, that's fantastic. You can turn that off. This is what they're doing to you on your credit cards. So they take the money you've punched up. They add to it your 14%. They do the math on how it turns out monthly. And then that rolls over the next month. And now, let's say it started at $3,000. Now you've got the interest was added on, and you didn't really pay much off of it. So now you've got, let's say, $3,050. It rolls over. Now they're going to add that 14% to the $3,050. And now it's going to grow again and again and again. And this is out of control. This is out of control. But this is the way that they're charging you on credit cards. So all unpaid balances carried over, charged again, accumulated more debt, and the process compounds higher and higher. Now, let's look at don't put it up yet, but the myth of minimum payments, because this is a trap. The whole minimum payment thing's a trap, okay? And it will keep you in debt for a long, long, long time if you have big amounts, okay? So let's look at this quick example, because they'll come to you and say, if you pay a minimum payment, and usually the minimum payment is anywhere from 1.5 to 2% that they assess. So you've got a $10,000 debt, they'll say 2% of that is what your minimum payment is, okay? So put that chart up. You got a balance of $10,000, okay? So your minimum payment, 10,000 times 2%, so it's $200 a month is your minimum payment, okay? Interest rate of 18%. So monthly interest, they charge it 10,000 times 18%. They come up with the yearly amount, which is $1,800 a year, and they divide it by 12. So you're being charged $150 interest a month, okay? So actual payment, if all you do is pay minimum payment, all you're really paying on the principal amount is $50. At that rate, providing you punch nothing new, it's a stagnant debt, is going to take you approximately 12 to 14 years to pay off, and you're going to have paid $30,000 to $35,000 when it's all done on minimum payments. Okay, so it's a myth. It's a way. Now let me give you a little study. You can turn that off. They did a research study, looked at how people's behavior changed when they saw a specific number marked as a minimum payment. So a random sample of 481 Americans saw a mock credit card statement showing a balance of $1,937. An annual percentage rate of 14%. Now, some saw no further information. All they saw was the balance and the percentage rate. Others were given one with a minimum payment of 2% of the balance that was mandatory, so it was listed on there, the amount, right? What they found was the people who did not see a minimum payment desired to pay a higher amount of their balance, significantly more than the 2%. So they're doing the whammy on you, man. When they put in that little thing, minimum payment, it does something to you psychologically, okay? Because they're banking on the fact that you're not going to have the discipline, that you're not going to have the wherewithal, you're not going to do the math, you're not going to see these charts, wow, minimum, cool. That means I can have more money to play over here on Saturday instead of, very foolish. At the minimum, if you really want to pay your card off, you pay the minimum payment plus whatever interest is accrued per month. At a minimum, if you want to keep it from just getting so out of control. Okay, so there's a lot to consider. So let's talk about getting out of debt. And this is where I'm going to just give my spiel, and I'm going to open it for others that have some expertise in the area and have some other ideas that can be helpful. And so getting out of debt, what I'm going to say here in this segment opens the door for others of you, but I'm going to present what they call the debt snowball approach, okay? Getting out of debt. This is one of the most common ones they put out there. But let me just say this, okay? No matter what you choose and what approach you choose to your debt, you're going to have to be very aggressive with your debt, okay? If you're not going to be aggressive, it's not going to work. You're going to have to see it as a threat, as something that has you in bondage. And you're going to have to be willing to sacrifice something in your life to get it done. There was a couple in our church in Houston. They were in $30,000 of various types of credit card debt and stuff. And, he made good money. He was an engineer. But he didn't make good enough money to tackle that, not at the interest rates and everything. So they just made up their mind. They just decided, that's it. We are attacking this. Now, in their case, it took 2 years, which was pretty impressive to do that in 2 years. But he made pretty good money as an engineer. But the way they did it, we would go out to eat. They wouldn't stop fellowshipping and this whole self-pity, moping thing. Oh, I can't go out, I can't afford it. They come drink water, And so that's what they would do. They'd order water, and this guy was opportunistic anyway. He knew not everybody ate their food on their plate, so he'd just wait. I know it's kind of ghetto, but he would just wait. Hey, you gonna eat that? I'm done. He got his meal anyway. But anyway, this is the way that they hunkered down everything with their children, with all their miscellaneous crazy spending. And in 2 years, they got out of debt. Okay? So it's going to take sacrifice. It's going to take a real conviction about this. It's finally time to say, that's it. No more. Enough is enough. Finished. If you don't have control, cut up your cards. Call your credit card people and close the account and just pay it. It'll still accrue. But do something. But you got to stop. You got to stop all the spending. You have to stop. Stop. Okay, now we said that. I'm going to show you a simple chart. You need to put everything you can think of. If you have warrants, if you have medical bills, whatever you got out there, you put it on this chart. You notice I said that, right? Because I know there's some warrants in here. But anyway, put it up. So this is what they call the debt snowball effect, okay? And I'm going to explain this as simple as I can. Now, this does not take into account, okay, when you're paying the minimum payment on these cards, it doesn't take into account the numbers I put here. It doesn't take into account the money you've paid down, and it doesn't take into account interest rates. I'm just doing hard numbers to give you an idea. So actually, you'll pay it off quicker than the months I say, because I'm not taking into account the money you're paying. So what you do is you list all your debts, the smallest to the biggest, okay? So whatever your smallest debt is, you put it on the top, the biggest debt on the bottom. This is typically how you do it, okay? So on the top, you have how much do you owe on each one. At JCPenney, you owe $175. Your furniture, you owe $850. Credit card, $3,500. Student loan, $6,500, okay? What is the current minimum payment? List that in there. Okay, you've got your minimum payment, $10, $50, $70, and $130. So the first card is the one that's going to get all the attention. Now, you have to maintain that minimum payment on the rest of them while you're doing this, okay? I had somebody call me one time, credit card went into arrears, and we were doing the debt approach, the snowball approach. Were you giving the minimum payments on the other ones? Oh, well, no, I was throwing it. Well, you got to give the minimum payments, okay? So on the top one, you're giving your minimum payment of $10, and let's just say you have $75 to spare. And I would say you throw as much at it as you possibly can do, as much as you can. $10 is the minimum, and then you got $75. So you're going to pay $85 a month on that one. And while you're doing that, you're paying the minimum payment on the rest, okay? So you pay that off in 2 months. Okay, the JCPenney's now paid off. So now you take that $85 at the very end that you were paying, you now roll that down to the furniture. So now you've got the $50 minimum payment and the $85 that was going to JCPenney, which is now $135 you can put on furniture. And maybe things have changed, God's blessed you, you've managed your money better, maybe you can throw more at it. That's going to take you 6 months to pay off. So at the end of 6 months, you're going to take that $135 you're giving to the furniture, all the while you're paying the minimum on the other ones. You now fold that $135 down to the credit card. So you were paying $70 minimum. You're now adding $135 to that. You're now paying $205 a month on that credit card. It's going to take you 17 months to pay it off. And then finally, you take that amount when it's paid off. All along, you're paying the student loan at $130. So that's why I said that amount's going to be less, but I didn't want to do all the math complications. You're actually going to have paid quite a bit off student loan with the $130. Then you're going to roll that 205 down, 130 and 205 is 335. It'll take you 19 months. Okay, so that's what you call the snowballing of debt approach. And it takes discipline, it takes conviction, and it takes a decision. This is what I'm going to do. Now, I realize, you can turn that off, that there's some of you are in such a predicament, it's snowballing you. And so the snowball approach is, you're so out of reality of how you're going to go about this. So, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a pastor. I only know what I know. I don't talk about what I don't know. So I'm going to start by letting Jonathan tell me about something he told me about on the phone, and then I'm going to open it to anybody else that either has questions. If I can't answer them, I'm sure somebody here can, or that has other solutions or thoughts. And so Jonathan's going to start with something he discovered, and then we're going to go from there.
Yeah, Pastor, if somebody, like you said, if you're in the position that the only way you'd ever be able to pay off the credit card debt that you're in is if you got some big increase at work or some miracle, if that's the only possible way, then there's a site you can go to, and it's a phone number also. It's called Christian Credit Counselors. And when you hear on the radio, you hear, obviously you don't want to beat bankruptcy, but the next step is settlements. And you'll see attorneys and all kinds of other advertisements for debt settlement. And that is almost as bad as bankruptcy, okay? That will ruin your credit just as bad. They call the credit card companies and tell them, hey, we're not paying you. You tell us how much you want to take, and it could be months before that credit card company gets any money. So your credit just is destroyed. Christian Credit Counselors does something totally different. They call these companies and tell them, look, we're going to pay you every month, but help us out. And they negotiate. And like you said, Pastor, they stop. If you do this, all of your credit cards, they don't close them, but you are no longer allowed to charge anything on those cards. They won't work. Then once you finish paying off all the cards, it will be on your credit report. It'll be like you paid them off completely with no negotiation. So it will help you tremendously. But again, all it does is, not only is it accountability, but it can help make, if you have 5, 6, 7 credit cards, all different interest rates, all different monthly payments, they negotiate it down, bring it all into one payment, fixed rate, lower payment. And I mean, I've helped clients do this. One example, it was going to take somebody 17 years to pay off their credit cards. They paid them off in 4 years. And again, it didn't destroy their credit. They're in a much better situation. They're really good to work with. So Christian Credit Counselors.
Okay, so let me say this too, and then anybody else that wants to speak. If you've already gone upside down on your credit card, they've turned it over to a credit agency. I don't know if you realize you can do the negotiations. And the way it typically works, they want their money. That's just what they want. Sure, they would love it with interest, but they just want their money. You can call them and you can do a couple of things. Sometimes you can do a payoff for a lesser amount if you have the money right then and there. But you can take it and tell them, look, I can't afford this. I don't want this to go complete. I want to pay the debt. And so what they do is they stop all interest accruing. They set it up almost like it was a loan. Let's just say you say, over 4 years, I'm going to pay this off. What are the numbers? How much a month am I going to? Let's just say they say, okay, if you give us $250, and you can negotiate, $250 a month, the card's closed, no interest on it, then it'll be done, it'll be paid off. The key is you cannot miss a payment. If you do, they'll say, deal's off. But there are ways, in other words, there are things that you need to educate yourself on. You need to ask others around. There's a lot of people in the church. Jonathan works in that type of industry. There's others here. They get informed. Figure this out. But it's not acceptable to just have it, be doing nothing about it, just saying, somehow one day I'll get around to it. No. That's not acceptable. I don't think God blesses that. Okay, you have to say, enough's enough. Whether it was your foolishness that did it, whether it was circumstances of life, the bottom line is there, and we have to do something about it, okay? Anybody else? Angel.
So, sometimes when we do the numbers, people can't really grasp they're looking like, well, it's only 9%, it's only
Right.
14%. That's nothing. And one thing that I try to get people to understand when it comes to numbers, because I talk to guys all the day. I used to teach the Dave Ramsey financial planning and all that those classes in high school. And so one of the things that and even I talk to people here all the time, and I tell them, look, that's high interest. Oh, it's nothing. Well, one thing that I always go to is I tell them, look, so you understand interest, and that little interest rate is, look at your house, at the size of your house, and look at the size of Wells Fargo Bank. Those people do nothing but charge that little interest, and their buildings are massive, and your house is tiny. And it says all they're doing is taking that little bit of interest, and they are super millionaires, because it adds up at the end of the day. Like you said, the 5-year thing that you showed was awesome, because it adds up. And so they make millions upon with the people just on that small interest rate alone.
Yep, you got to get it, man. They're not in it for your best interest, I can tell you that. George Ponce, and then we'll come over to Ray.
Pastor, when I first came into this church, I remember us being in Fort Boulevard. There was a bunch of young people, hardly nobody was married. And Pastor Warner had the wisdom to send a guy to our church and teach a Sunday school like this about money. And I was in debt, in credit card debt. And I remember back then he said very similar things that you're saying. And, all of a sudden, it's like this light bulb went on in my head, and I understood credit card is bad, and God's way of I think where we miss the root of this problem is that God's way of bringing maturity to our lives is to discipline our lives and stay within our means. And a budget, to a lot of people, budget, the word just bounces off our heads. Yeah. But the reality is that God's way of maturing us from little children that can only drink milk into big, mature adults is that daily self-control of remaining within our like I learned that a long time ago. And right now I give myself a salary, and me and my wife work off that salary. We've done that since day one. I heard Pastor Stevens tell people, if you're going to start a church, you need to learn how to live with, in small means. It's the same thing in business. If you're going to start a business, you have to learn to live within a certain amount of money and invest the rest of it. That's how you do real business. If you can't control your spending, and if you don't have that, your business will suffer. I hear people say, oh, it's too hard, or this happened, or that happened. But the truth is, they didn't live within a means. We still live within a means, me and my wife. We have a salary, and we can't spend more than that. Everything else gets invested, or we help out with the kingdom of God. That's the way we live. I believe that I'm going to answer for every dollar that comes through my hands. I'm going to be responsible when God calls me to account. I'm going to have to explain where this money went and how I spent it and how I used it. That I learned that through this guy. His name was Goldberg, and he explained a lot of these things. And that's what I see. Back then, we didn't have any. We had a car with no air conditioner. Back then, those days, it was, and the biggest flaw I see in our church today is that you see people driving nice cars, people that have been in the church a long time. They have already gotten to, through maturity, they understand that. And young people want those things right away. And then they get themselves in this trouble. And then it starts all over. I just thought I'd make that comment.
No, that's a great observation and input. Ray Ortiz.
In the situation that you mentioned, as far as maybe getting a lower payment or even a lower interest rate, we had come into some money, and we called up the credit card companies, and we told them, you know what, how much do you want and stuff. and we kind of negotiate even on our own without having to go through a credit card or through a financial institute or anything else. We went in and we told them how much do you want, and they would tell how much we want. Okay, so we'll go ahead and send this off to you. Another situation was also with an interest rate. There was a particular interest rate card we had for a while. We went to go ahead and negotiate with them. But keep in mind, you've got to go ahead and have a good credit on this. You can't have a bad credit and start trying to negotiate with them. But if you have a good credit line and tell them, you know what, we'd like to go ahead and have our interest rate lowered, they would go ahead and consider it, and then they'll go ahead and lower that also. But keeping in mind, keeping a good credit on that, then they'll work with you.
Yep. Oh, Mark.
I just want to share two things with the church. Those of you that have school loans out there, there is a debt forgiveness program that everyone is entitled to get. One of them example is if you say become a teacher or anything of that nature, they can forgive your debt between $13,000 and $17,000 if you serve at least 4 years, a minimum of 4 years. Now, there's also another program that's called Public Servant Loan Forgiveness, that if you publicly serve in one company for 10 consecutive years, they will forgive your entire school loan. Of course, they'll base even a minimum payment based on your income and your household, but typically it's $0. And if you can do that for 10 consecutive years, they'll forgive the entire debt. My wife's on that right now. She has about a $35,000 school loan that we've paid nothing over the course of our marriage. And so she needs about 6 more years before they'll forgive the entire debt. So that's something very helpful out there, guys. Another thing that we do, we budget ourselves with a $1,000 limit per month. I have a credit card that I've had for approximately 4 years, and I've paid only 2.03% in the last 4 years in interest, and it was at a very high interest rate. But because I'm able to discipline our spending with that one card, obviously we do have other cards for with higher balances, but we limit ourselves monthly and pay it. If we spend $500 this week, next week I pay it off in full. And I've never paid anything more than 2.03% in the last 4 years. So that's very helpful for if you guys can discipline yourselves that way.
Amen. Somebody over here had a hand. Angel.
I had 2 questions for Jonathan. I didn't notice if he mentioned the Christian credit counseling service. Is there a fee? Is it free? And the other is, of course, when you begin to work with them, those credit cards, they're, I guess, temporarily, they cancel them. At what point, and if they do, I'm assuming after it's all paid off, do they start off where you began?
Yes, so it's not free. It's a $100 one-time setup fee, which, again, when people are in the position that they're in, $100 shouldn't be a big deal to do what they're going to do. The other thing, like Ray said, yes, you could negotiate on your own, but if you're in the position where what I'm talking about, you probably don't have good credit. You probably are not in a good position to negotiate, and that's what they're for, is they are in a good position to negotiate, and they could help you there. I do believe they have a small, it's like $15, $20 a month, something like that, per creditor, up to a max of $45 a month. So yes, they're not doing it.
That you can use, or what do you mean?
Yes, so let's say you have a Visa, a Chase, a Bank of America, et cetera. It's 15 each, up to a max of, if you have 20, the most they're going to charge is, I think it's $45 a month. But again, once you go through the process and you see that you're saving 10 years and your payment actually went down, it's worth it.
And do the other question he had, do the credit cards ever become where you can use
Oh,
them
and yeah,
again?
sorry, Angel. The other thing is, yes, you cannot use them until you completely finish the program. Once you finish and pay it off, then those credit cards become available to you again at the full credit limit. Heck, they'll probably even give you more, which may not be a good thing,
Yeah.
but just cut them up and be done with it.
Amen. Okay, right over here. Let me see what okay, I got all the way over in the corner, and then we'll come back over here. Just stay right here. We're going to finish it off with Jessica.
I just wanted to make a comment about wanting to get the things you want and the things
Okay,
you
turn
can
her up a
afford.
little bit.
So a few years ago, I was in a situation when I had a really crappy car. And I was a single mom, no child support, with a mortgage and the bills that come with it. And I needed a car because I had 3 jobs that I had to get to. So the first thing I did is think about what I wanted and what I could afford versus what I could afford. So I got pre-approved to what I could afford. And with my pre-approval letter, I went and looked at the cars that I could afford and versus the ones that I wanted. So I ended up with a really good car that helped me get to work and helped me pay my bills by taking me to work, but it's not the car that I really wanted. I wanted a nice
Yeah.
Toyota Corolla, but I couldn't afford it. So,
Don't say that. Somebody here might offer it to you.
well, I cannot afford it either,
Yeah,
you know.
All right, and we're going to finish it off with Jessica.
So me and my husband started the money makeover sometime last year, and it was right before Christmas, and it was the hardest thing ever because something that Dave Ramsey says, and it's a saying that we have up on our kitchen, our refrigerator. It's live like no one else, so later you can live and give like no one else, and that has been our saying, our motivation. It's if we live our life in an upside down triangle, you know, so tight at the beginning of our marriage, you know, we feel like we have this income and we feel like we should reward ourselves for the hard work that we put in. But if we live so tight later on in life, maybe, you know, we could retire with a lot more. We can live our upside down triangle and later on in life have so much room to grow and to give. And like how I said, we started before Christmas. Live like no one else means like you live like a weirdo. You live on a super tight budget. You don't go out to eat when everybody else does. And you homemade your Christmas presents. You bake cookies instead of getting your mom expensive stuff. And that's what we had to do. And it was the hardest thing because I had never experienced that growing up with my parents. I learned to ask for loans. I learned to get credit cards. And that's what I grew up with. And so when I got married with my husband, it was out of the question. He was just like, no, we're going to live on a budget and we're going to, you know, do this total money makeover and get our life straight from the very beginning. So at the end, when we have kids, we can show them, you know, and just keep the cycle going and stop that curse, stop that, I don't know, that spirit of debt, I guess you could say it. It's a spirit that passes on to your kids. And I guess I could say coming from a kid that got that curse passed on, parents, it's very important right now if your kids are small or they're going to be stepping into life. It's what you show them now, what you do with your money, because they're going to grow up and they're going to get married one day and they're going to follow straight into your footsteps.
Yeah, it can absolutely have an element she's talking about being passed on, but it's also a decision. Let me say 2 things and I'm done. Let me first say, if you're getting married, don't be foolish. People get married, they have honeymoons they can't afford, they have receptions they can't afford, they buy furniture they can't afford. When we got married, we had this simple thing. We weren't going to have a full-fledged reception. Her mother paid for it, so we did it. Otherwise, you were going to get punch and cake. We were out of there. And we didn't have any furniture. I had to get a cosign back then. My dad co-signed for $1,500 worth of furniture. That furniture lasted us 15 years before we bought any other furniture. So don't be dumb with your marriage. And second of all, you ladies learn, okay, say this, it'll be offensive, learn to cook. Yeah, both my daughters are very good cooks. They could cook it up for you, amen. And so they live in there. They don't eat out all the time. It's good for you health-wise. It helps your budget, right? Learn to cook. It'll set you free. All right, we're done. Thank you.